So I'll start with Mr. Ian Hunt, who is Vice President of Sales for MENA at 3T Energy Group. And maybe, Ian, if I can just ask you that same question. In your context at 3T, what is digitalization in the oil field?
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and welcome everybody. So I've been in the industry 35 years, and most of my industry has been focused on the reservoir, the data required to build geological models that help companies make decisions, strategic long-term decisions. And clearly, the data density, i.e. the quality and the quantity of data, helps improve understanding, reduce uncertainty, and leading to better decisions for companies. But that was my past. Now I'm working for 3T Energy, and 3T Energy is basically a training company. And you could argue, well, how does training benefit from data? Well, the 3T stands for Transforming Training with Technology. We transform the way training is delivered to improve performance. And we use technology to do that. And we've got 3 divisions in the company. One of them is the global leader in drilling simulation equipment, drilling well control simulation equipment, well intervention equipment, and lifting and craning simulators. But one of the other divisions is a technology division where we use virtual reality. And one particular example I'd like to reflect on is a contract we won with BP just recently. And they required us to build a digital twin of one of their assets, an FPSO that they were planning to build in Asia, but deploy in Mauritania. Well, that had a number of challenges. The amount of data required to build a digital twin, an exact replica of such a massive multi-billion-dollar vessel was, I'm sure you can appreciate, quite challenging. But we did that. We built this digital twin of the asset, and all of the plumbing and the flow controls within that system. And then we used that to help train and onboard the local people. BP obviously had the desire to use local staff to work on this vessel, but the cost associated with just the travel cost of moving people from Mauritania to Asia and the inconvenience of that was quite significant. So we developed a training course, a blended training course using this digital asset to help improve the efficiency of the training. So everyone was trained before the vessel was even completed. And, it wasn't just the familiarization with the vessel, walking around. It was also all the safety induction and the safety requirements as well. For example, if one of the production technicians was walking along the 3rd floor of this massive vessel and there was suddenly a gas explosion on one of the compressors, he knew exactly where to go to isolate that flow and then to go to safety. So the whole training program was delivered before the vessel was even built. So using that data, digitalization intensity, helped BP generate significant value.
Fantastic, thank you. And again, another great practical example of the use of data analytics, digitalization, improving safety, training in the oil field. Again, today, these things happening right at the moment. We'll move next to Mr. Angus Rodger, who is Vice President of Services at Proserv. And again, Angus, the same question to you.
Thanks, Tom. Morning, everyone. So Proserv, we're a controls technology company, primarily focusing around critical infrastructure for production. So a lot of buffer control panel or at-site technology. So we really have come from a history of physical intervention, mechanical hydraulic upgrades on relatively or completely analog systems over the last 20, 30 years. We've seen a lot of introduction of obviously digitalization of those systems. And what we're really using that for is not just to visualize when critical changes occur at the well site, but because we've now got such a backdated history of embedded infrastructure that we've been able to retrofit new technology onto, it's now using all of that legacy data to not just run scheduled maintenance and scheduled intervention, but really be able to determine when we need to intervene and when we don't in quite so many options like that. So we go everywhere from servicing wellhead control panels out in the Arabian desert here, and I really like the fact that you talked about the augmented reality goggles. We physically use those on the ground here in the Middle East, and we run, when we're taking part in interventions or going inspecting a well, we'll be connected up to engineers in the UK or US or Norway, depending on the challenges we face to go there. Now, ultimately, we can transition that kind of approach to some of the work we're doing in the Gulf of Mexico, with a major, or with an independent operator out there, where we've been installing and manufacturing subsea control systems for them over the past decade or so. And a lot of the intervention with subsea controls infrastructure is obviously very costly. If you ever have to go down and recover any of that subsea infrastructure, a significant amount of money, and a significant carbon footprint as well from mobilizing FPSOs and recovering all of that equipment. So the fact that we've got an install base out there, we've been able to draw on some of that data, and like I say, not just predict when things are going to fail, but predict the severity of that failure. So what stage of intervention is needed? Do we need to fully recover, or is there some remote upgrades or some remote changes we can make? So I think the digitalization of the oil field initially has really gone a long way to visualize the failures that have been occurring. But for me, the use of data and big data is really now starting to help us understand and inform our decisions as to what intervention to take ahead of that failure occurring. So that's sort of the practical application of what we see.
Fantastic, thank you, Angus. Again, practical applications happening right now in the industry. We'll turn now to our final panelist, Mr. David Clark, who's the Chief Executive Officer at the Vysus Group. And David, the same question as well, please.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So, David Clark from Vysus Group. Vysus is a new name, a relatively new name. In fact, it's our birthday tomorrow. We'll be 2 years old. Although we're a new name, we're a very long and seasoned company. We've got multiple decades of experience as a technical engineering advisory, regulatory advisory business with operations globally. And interestingly, we operate across the oil and gas sector, nuclear, renewables, power infrastructure, and complex industrials. When we look at data and we look at the challenges that are ahead of us, we in our business are very much involved in helping our customers unpick the complexity of the data that's coming at them. And as my colleagues on the panel have talked about, there's an enormous amount of data that's being generated right the way through the life cycle, the development, the design, the implementation, and the operations of assets. Actually understanding what's in there and getting critical decision support out of that is one of the key factors. And that's where a business like ours, we provide a lot of insight in helping customers analyze the information, make sense of that, and help feed that back into the business processes and business systems. And we use that with different technologies and with partners, whether that's on the ESG side, so talking about an ability to measure and quantify Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 levels of carbon production or carbon usage within a company, being able to lock that in and really understand that and track that in a consistent, reliable way. The other area that we are heavily involved in is with customers where they're integrating new energy solutions. So more and more we're seeing new technologies, new projects being developed where wind energy is being used to power oil and gas assets, or we're generating hydrogen or ammonia as fuel systems. So there's multiple changes going on in the energy world, and we're seeing more and more where the overlaps of the different sectors, whether it's oil and gas, to grid infrastructure, to gas distribution, to transportation, becomes more and more complex, they're overlapping, and therefore the ability to understand critical data and critical flow of information is really key. As an example on that, we're working with customers looking at the reliability of grid infrastructure. So within our business, we have a product called ProMaps, which is quite a unique technology that allows probabilistic analytics on grid infrastructure and the reliability of that based on load conditions, age of assets, weather conditions, and all other factors. That's really key when you look at how our sector in oil and gas is becoming more and more electrified. And the ability to have really reliable, predictable power is key. And so we're working with a number of clients on implementing technologies there to give a higher level of assurance that as they electrify their systems, that they will be able to operate at optimum performance and that they can ensure they get no blackouts or brownouts through the production. For that, I'll pass back. Thanks, Tom.
David, thanks so much for that. Again, some great insights there, and really good context around the need to think not just in the oil and gas sector, but as a more connected energy angle as well, because of course this energy structure becoming increasingly complex and integrated as we move forward. And of course we've seen some of the ramifications of that, predictability of power, most definitely, and the affordability of energy prices across most of the world now. So some fantastic work. So what we'll do now is, and I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you're preparing your questions. We'll be switching to the audience Q&A shortly. I'm just going to leave that now. I'm going to start asking a couple of questions to the panelists. So start thinking about your questions, and I'll turn over to you in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So going straight into the Q&A section. So Microsoft recently launched the Microsoft Energy Data Services. Would you share lessons learned about innovation, partnerships, and demand from the market?
Hello. Okay. Thank you for the question. So I was thinking about maybe a theme that connects nicely to this, to our data topic, and collaboration. So a lot of us in this room are working on these topics and trying to figure out what are lessons learned from similar projects. So one of the things we learned from launching Microsoft Energy Data Services, and I explained earlier, this is basically a data layer that allows for the interoperability of data across various E&P environment applications. Schlumberger Delphi, Landmark, DS365, on and on and on. We had to work together. So the open subsurface data universe is an open group. It's comprised of dozens and dozens of oil and gas operators, services companies. Some of you in the room might be members, active members. This is like years of work, 7 to 8 years, and it continues on. OSDU just had their annual meeting in Houston recently. Basically, it's members contributing from their IP, their knowledge, the challenges that they face. We contributed, other companies have contributed, and we've all sort of learned about what it takes to create a platform that allows to do that. And so that's one of the things we've learned, is that in order to address a lot of the data challenges that we'll face and to be able to create value, we have to collaborate. We have to collaborate. We have to identify our partners and work deeply with them for a consistent period of time. So as you think about data-related projects or initiatives or value in your business that you want to bring, think about the partners you want to bring to the table. Think about, are there existing maybe open groups, or there's a manufacturing open group as an example, for those of you in the room who straddle between manufacturing and energy. So there's so many potential ways to bring value by working together. And for us, we've learned that that helps to drive innovation.
Yura, thanks so much for that. It does seem that there's a real theme emerging here around defining the problem, standardization, and of course collaboration is going to be a key part of that. All these different members of the different stakeholders in the industry communicating more. Maybe David, I'll bring you into the conversation here, because you mentioned the need to communicate with your clients around scope emissions, scope 1, scope 2, or maybe most interesting, scope 3 emissions, where definitions are a little bit more woolly perhaps. Maybe could you talk us through some of the challenges around definition and standardizing this industry of your clients?
So the work that we do is in helping customers with their ESG metrics goes back many years, 15, 18 years or so. And our team help our customers define their carbon footprint, their environmental metrics. A lot of that obviously is in their own consumption, and then moving into the supply chain. The scope 3 phase is a major challenge that ultimately is the end user consumer is, and the final user of the energy is the metric there. But at the top side, where 1 and 2, where we're able to provide a real detailed analysis of all of the elements within the business and then moving into their supply chain. And with our partner building a tool that allows us to establish the metrics, build the connections into the various data platforms and supply chain systems, ERP applications, to be able to then pull data, lock that in using blockchain technology to allow that to then flow through the system, so that from a customer, whether quarterly or annual reports, they're able to provide verifiable data as part of their ESG compliance.
Yep. No, fantastic. It does seem that businesses at the forefront of this have a real first mover advantage in helping define the industry as well. So it's very exciting times. Angus, you gave some great insights around practical applications of data, using some of the data available on the panel as well, which is great to see that synergy already. We've been talking about condition-based maintenance for a very long time in the oil and gas industry. What's changed over the past couple of years? What are some of the obstacles to future uptake?
Yeah, it's been talked about for a long, long time. Real application of it is the challenge. And the experience that we've had is it's ensuring that, kind of to your point there with working with partners, it's ensuring that the key individuals from the asset side of things, from the operator side, are really brought into that. I recall conversations 3-4 years ago even, in a short past, where operators were effectively saying, you're going to need to predict that this is going to fail, and we're going to have to see it fail 3 times before we're going to take your advice and actually make a change before we do it. That sentiment, I genuinely do feel has switched in the last couple of years. Have felt a big difference in some of the operators really being more forthcoming in taking forward and trusting some of the partnerships a bit more. It's always, to try and encourage a subsea operator in the Gulf of Mexico to spend a couple of $1 million and recover a system that in theory is operating is a very challenging conversation to have. So for us, I think partly has been the relationship side, but also being able to walk them through the journey and give it and show practical examples of minor failures, minor things, which, as I mentioned earlier, not all of these alerts require immediate intervention. So I think it's been able to walk them down a path and say, look, where we've been working with operators XYZ in this part of the world, we've seen similar instances of this data occurring, and actually walk them along that journey, take them through it. And it is something that, it's a trusting exercise. Yeah. We have to trust the data, but we also need to get the operators and our partners to trust it. So that's really where we've seen it. It's just baby steps to a certain extent. It's actually really helpful when you have some of those minor failures, and you're able to walk them through it. But I do genuinely feel that there's been a shift in the industry in the last couple of years, and I think part of that has been because operators and everyone has been forced to be a bit more remote and a bit more hands-off, and you're not being able to use the excuse of, well, we need to go and see it, we need to go and touch it, as we used to be able to so easily a few years ago. We have to be adopting more of these remote techniques.
That's great insights there. I think it's one of the upsides of the pandemic potentially as well, silver linings. Our reliance on data, and the thing that we can actually rely on data more and more, as you say, a critical part of that. And certainly difficult to change mindsets in this industry, going to be one of the big obstacles. But Mohammed, you obviously have some examples of how your technology and your innovation is actually saving money for people today. So maybe you could elaborate on some of the time and cost savings by utilizing smart contract technology.
Right, yeah, it's a very good question for that. Mainly the most savings are the manpower and giving the time and luxury for people to focus on more strategic business, especially if they're looking for the operation on the rig side or any other side, looking on safety of their teams on locations. At the same time, if they are going to be like more strategic decisions or business-oriented things. So their time, right now we're targeting 0 to make this like looking for the paperwork invoicing 0 as a target, but we managed to reach right now to save their time by 20%. And I believe with more knowledge and more experience for more clients and people to utilize smart contracts, we will be able to reach the goal. That's talking about time savings. In terms of cost, we managed to prove it's something between 7 to 10% cost saving in terms of generally a smart contract. But if we go more specifically, it can be applied on operation, can be applied on supply chain, utilization of trucks. So I would say here you will be able just to pay for what you utilize. So talking about trucking, for example, diesel trucking, water trucking, material traceability. So no room to lose anything, no room to pay for additional services. It was not executed in terms of human errors, in terms of duplication of the invoice. But again, it's very, very accurate. So by doing this, I would say what was achieved already till now, it's 7 to 10%, but we are looking for more. I mean, sky's the limit for us, and we are looking for more savings, especially in those days.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you so much. And Ian, it is fascinating, the digital twin, the way you describe it, that you can walk onto an FPSO, $1 billion asset, day one. It's like you've been there for a year already. You already know how to react because you've already gone through the processes and the simulations. But what are the risks there as well? And how does the role of humans going to evolve? And can we ever get to a fully automated system?
Well, actually, I'd encourage any of you in the audience to come down to our booth in Hall 12, 12210, where we've got the virtual reality. We've got some digital assets of rigs, offshore rigs there, and onshore rigs as well. So you can put on the VR and experience walking around an offshore rig. If any of you have never been on a vessel or an asset like that, I encourage you to come down and play. It's quite exciting. But that will never detract from the fact that we still have to have human contact with these people. You still have to physically experience that. You can't do everything in the digital world. Just like building geological data models, it's fine doing it in a digital sense, but you still have to use the numbers in reality. So people still have to do the work. You can't always rely on computers to do that. So we're never going to be moving away from that. In fact, in one of my previous jobs, I had a company that was built geological data models for production optimization. And today the workflow takes months to build a geological model, to upscale it, to run into a dynamic simulator. And the company I used to work for built this technology that could do that in just a few days, rather than months, just a few days. And when we were selling the technology, the first reaction from the reservoir engineers was, hey, I'm going to lose my job. And that was a very real barrier to selling the technology, that people you're selling it to thought we were replacing their jobs. In a training sense, it's completely the opposite. When we go to customers and talk to them about the potential of this new technology, virtual reality, for example, they get excited. They want to embrace that technology because they see the power and they see how it can influence and enhance their training programs, rather than pushing back and saying, hey, we're going to be replaced. They enhance it, they encourage it, and they welcome it. So actually, it depends what side of the industry you're playing in. It depends how that response is.
Absolutely. Complementary, not a substitution. I think fantastic insight. So I think at this point, we're going to transition over to the audience. So hopefully you guys, I'm sure you have a lot of questions for the panelists here. So show of hands. Who would like to go first? I think we have a gentleman over there. If you could just state your name, organisation, who are your questions for?
Good morning. I'm also with Vysus Group, Neil Rimmer. Just in terms of collaboration that was mentioned, what's your concerns as a group about the security as you share information? Same as everybody who's normally paranoid about security of infrastructure, facilities. Is there any concerns about sharing of data and the security of any shared data?
Who would like to tackle that first?
So I'll touch on a couple topics, and I was looking for an opportunity to tie in cybersecurity as well. As we move more data to the cloud, which is that's a trend we're riding, right? We see a lot of energy operators are saying we're out of the data center business, we're moving to the cloud, or we are very comfortable moving sensor data to the cloud. We're comfortable moving data related to our hydrocarbons to the cloud. That's creating cultural challenges. So I love, Ian, the example you gave about folks concerned, like, hey, is my job going away? But this is a digital transformation enabler. So it's doing that, but then there's also a concern of cybersecurity. And we've seen many retail-related cybersecurity breaches. It's no different for industrial. You know, there are refineries that get breached and different things. And so that's sort of a key tech trend that we all need to become high-level SMEs of cybersecurity. It starts from when a phishing email comes in, don't click on it, all the way to when you're working on your industrial IoT projects and data projects. Cybersecurity has to be core. Now, touching on your topic around, your question around sharing and things like that, the learnings from Open Subsurface Data Universe is there were rules. You know, one, don't share IP that you're not comfortable sort of it being out there in the market. For example, you can go to the OSDU website and download a community version of OSDU. That is available to everybody. So having that comfort that you have to share very selective information with specific IP is important. But there's another angle to your question as well, because we have, for example, customers that are joint ventures. There are 3-4 companies in a JV, and they want to be able to integrate their data, but not see each other's data, but learn from each other's data. And how do you do that? So we launched something called confidential compute as a way to tease out the learnings from data without actually making that data available. And we're going to need to drive collaboration. We're going to need more solutions like that. Those are the kind of solutions that will address that issue, because till today, a lot of JVs choose not to commingle their data for obvious reasons, right? There are compete reasons for which they can't do that. So if we can actually prove that, like this solution I just talked about, allows one energy operator to learn salient details, high-level details about that reservoir, and leverage lessons learned from another energy operator without sort of infringing on confidentiality, then it's good for everybody. That's the path, that's the vision.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly agree. There is significant challenges in data security, and as we're seeing the level of threat increase particularly on critical infrastructure, whether that's in the grid world, whether it's in power distribution, or utility management. So it's an area that the governments, the security authorities are becoming ever more aware of the challenges. Layered on top of that, of course, there's an awful lot of this infrastructure, be it in the oil and gas world, the refining, the petrochemicals, the utilities, that's pretty old. And the ability to maintain that is a big challenge. One of the keys to help unlocking that has already been highlighted, is not necessarily opening up the world to everyone. It's being able to take data feeds of relevant information, provide the analytics on that, and provide insight back into the end users, the asset owners, to be able to make decisions, informed decisions. But managing that is absolutely critical, and thinking about security, thinking about the security model from day one is key in any development, whether it's a brand new greenfield asset or whether it's a brownfield asset going through significant change. We've got to think about the security model absolutely as a core element of the design, the planning, and the operations.
Anybody else in the panel? Okay, back to the floor. Any questions for the panel here? Okay, well, I'll keep going, and then when stuff comes to you, just raise your hands. David, I just want to come back to you on one of the things you brought up, and your experience working not just in oil and gas, kind of across the energy sector. So, how would you rank the oil and gas sector versus these other parts of the energy chain when it comes to the adoption of big data and digitalization?
It's a good question. I mean, one thing, oil and gas has been challenged by a business model on how we develop assets and how we build them. I mean, one of the great things about the oil and gas sector is we're fantastic at doing very large-scale infrastructure, multiple tens of billions of dollars, multiple decade-long projects. But very often, that's done in a way that's not really connected from start to finish. So you see the challenges of, reservoir subsurface guys coming up with a great solution, say, right, we're going to produce this. It comes out, we're going to have this mix of hydrocarbon. Therefore, we're going to build all of this infrastructure to process it in this way, blah, 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 all the way down the line. Of course, that's not what happens. You end up getting something a little bit different coming out of the oil well. You've got a design team that's fully focused on building the asset as cheaply and as quickly as possible, and they don't worry about the operational phase. So you end up with this challenge of operations, facilities going live, and immediately day one, you're having to modify it, you're having to do changes, and you have to understanding the data through that. We are getting better at that, and I think the oil and gas sector in executing big projects is something that, as the world moves towards new renewables and transition technology solutions, we have to be a key part of that. Oil and gas market has to be a key part of it. Mm-hmm. The bigger challenge there as well is as we start to look at the integration of new systems, of new energy solutions. So whether that's oil and gas to grid, to wind, to whatever, you have this problem of overlapping regulatory frameworks, overlapping stakeholders with a different view and a different perspective. So managing the data flow through that, managing the insights through that is really quite critical. And that's where a holistic approach using common platforms, exchanging information in a secure manner is going to become key to the success of this going forward.
Yeah, standardization, one of those words that's coming to the fore more and more. There's no other question on the floor right now, I don't think, but Angus, you gave us a great case study in the Gulf of Mexico, some of the more advanced things you're doing with big data, digitalization. How would you kind of compare other parts of the world and their willingness to adopt this technology? Maybe starting with your experiences in this part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a huge variation. In my experience from the individuals, the customers that we're working with, I would say the part of the market that we're in traditionally oil and gas in the Middle East. And like I say, most of the work that we're doing is in the field. It's quite physical, it's quite hands-on. So the approach of some of the asset owners, the local asset owners, is still that way. But there is a big movement, there is a big drive from more senior management within the operators out here to move far more towards the digital remote operations. I mean, we operate in the North Sea in Norway as well, and I think the most advanced conversations and the most willing environment that I see, we're working the offshore wind in the North Sea. We've got a bit of technology called ECG, and it's a cable monitoring technology for subsea cable arrays. And it's a technology we've taken from our heritage in oil and gas subsea and evolved into the offshore wind. And I think there is, we feel anyway, a slightly different approach from the operators that we're working with in offshore wind, and they are more willing to adapt. I think the subsea environment in the Gulf of Mexico is catching up quite quickly, I would say, to the North Sea. But certainly the Norwegians and the North Sea are the ones leading the way for us from a willingness to adopt from day one, as you said. Conversations right at the start of the development. They're not afterthoughts. They're They're not, oh, we've got the production up and running, we've got all this information, now what do we do with it? They're thinking about it from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem offshore wind at the forefront, and Equinor keeps coming up. Oh, I think you'd like to add something. Absolutely.
Didn't want to lose an opportunity to talk about data sovereignty, because that's also another side to the story as well, in terms of parts of the world where, like in this one, where there are a lot of countries that have data sovereignty policies. Saudi Aramco is a wonderful example. Microsoft does not have a data center in Saudi Aramco. So that means that any cloud-related initiatives have to be done creatively. So we have a solution that is, we call it Azure Stack. It's a on-prem-like version of cloud services. So you sort of slot that server into Saudi Aramco's data center, but you can leverage Azure IoT and other Azure services. But of course, limited, you can't get the full range of services that you get in the cloud. But just wanted to mention, that's another angle. As you think about your projects, another potential advantage or restriction, depending on the region, will be that data sovereignty question as well.
Thanks so much for that. And just staying on the topic, I guess, Mohammed, I mean, we've talked a lot around Aramco and Equinor really being at the forefront of adoption, but maybe you could elaborate on some of your experiences with Equinor with smart contract technology.
Yeah, as we said, I mean, we started with Equinor in Norway, and they were like very smart, and they were eager to utilize the system and get the value added from it. And right now, they are getting the fruits out of it. And I would say the average daily saving from one asset is like more than $20,000 or $25,000 per day. And it could be more, by the way, by more utilizing more applications and more areas of the application. So that's why we're looking for it. Talking about specifically for Equinor right now, yeah, they're utilizing it, and they're getting for the implementation phase, and they're seeing very easy and very smooth touchless operation, automation, and rather than doing all the manual process and manual techniques they were done, it just goes automatically right now. So again, they would like to increase the utilization of it for another assets, and not only with them, but the beauty of the system is he can distribute it or he can share it with all other buyers within the same nodes. So for example, if they're dealing with some other service companies, you can name Schlumberger, Halliburton, Baker, or any other companies on the rig side, they can get more data stream from the source and give us more nodes. And the more nodes you have in the system, that will be much more flexible and give you more data, and at the end of the day, that will help us to serve you better and to give you more accurate and more flawless data. So that's why we're encouraged to have more parties involved in the system, more nodes, more nodules. I mean, whenever we have more this, we can give better quality and better service, and for sure faster service.
Fantastic, thank you. And Ian, we'll come back to you. And as you kind of talked through, again, the digital twin and the training systems, there's an obvious application in areas of high local content, areas of high local content for crewing and staffing and resourcing, where you maybe don't have the legacy of oil and gas. What are some of the challenges you're finding when you're trying to convince clients to kind of buy into your services?
I'm okay with this one. This one's working okay. Yeah, we have a number of challenges, not just talking with customers about localization, but that's one particular challenge in this area in Middle East, North Africa, especially with the increase in drilling activity that's started. A number of drilling rigs are having to come into the area. A number of crews have to be used on those rigs. A number of those crews aren't trained. And there's a lot of initiatives, Aramco especially, driving the Saudization through the ICTVA programs. So how do you go about training these local staff to be effective and competent on location? Well, we've got a number of programs that help that. Drilling simulators help that. But it's a bit of a sausage factory, really. You have to put a lot of people through to get a few people out the other end. convincing the organisations to do it is not really a problem. It's actually getting them to do it. Well, they all agree they need to do it, but actually it's one of the things that they slow to adopt. Prioritisation is typically the biggest issue there. They're more concerned about getting assets on location to do the work rather than staffing them up, and it's one of the biggest challenges the industry's felt for many years. The organisations across the whole supply chain of the oil and gas is really slow to adopt to change. You see the market rates increasing, whether it's commodity prices, whether it's drilling activity, but the actual staffing of the organisations to meet those growth challenges, it's the same thing. I mean, in my 35 years, I've seen probably 5 or 6 significant up and down turns in the organisations, in the market, and it's the same thing every time. Organisations are slow to react on the down and slow to react on the up. It's nothing special.
No, we're kind of like cruise ships like that, aren't we, as an industry? Very slow to turn.
Absolutely.
Looking back at the audience, yes, we have a question. Someone, I think Dan's coming behind you with the microphone.
Hi, I think across the suite it's really impressive to hear about how data is really informing decisions that we're making now for the future, but I would like to know, what do you see as some of the big data challenges that we still need to break down now in order to meet some of the big targets that are up ahead? What are the frustrations that you see in data, and what do we still need to break down in order to meet big targets in like energy transition, for example?
We've talked a lot around the external challenges, and now the internal challenges, the data itself. So, David, I can see you're chomping at the bit.
I guess coming back to it, there's a few things internally on data, but externally, a major challenge for us in delivering on the energy transition and being able to achieve the scale of transformation in energy systems is colossal. And in a number of the regions that we work in and the customers that we support, trying to help join the dots together is a big challenge. And I'll throw out an example from UK PLC. In the last year or so, we've awarded what's called Scotland, which is acreage of the northeast coast of Scotland for the development of floating and offshore wind. And it's a fantastic initiative. There's 25 gigawatts of committed license awards. And operators want to be able to do that in the next, 5 to 7 years. Unfortunately, no one thought to talk to the national grid, who had a plan to do 11 gigawatts of connections. And so we've got a disconnect between the operators wanting to build stuff and the ability to actually plug it into the national grid and actually use the energy that's being generated. It's one of those examples of where we've absolutely got to get the bodies, the regulators, the thinking into one room and connected together. Critical to all of that is, of course, information, key data, and being able to assess the information that's there and make sensible decisions on that. So, it is a challenge for us to be able to step that out. The other part of this is just scaling on the supply chain and on the training piece on this. Our ability to actually manufacture, to engineer, to develop the business is going to be a significant challenge for us at a global level. So, we need to do lots in multiple areas. The training and development of new technology, new talent, attracting talent into our sector, as well as building a robust, commercially viable and scalable supply chain to go with that.
I suppose I'll add a slightly different angle onto that as well. I think you touched right at the end there on attracting new talent and things into the energy industry or the oil and gas industry, out in this part of the world. I think society's belief in some of the data and the information that we're putting out there is a big thing. Ultimately, we need to continue attracting new talent and the best minds into what is the energy industry. But we still need very good talent for many years to come in the oil and gas sector of that. And I think it will be a long journey in different parts of the world, similar to what we talked about adopting technology. Some parts of the world are, educated to a further extent on the, the background to oil and gas and the processes it's actually going through as an industry. But I see that as a big challenge in the next sort of 10 to 20 years. How do we make sure we're attracting fresh, new talent into the industry and it's not seen as a negative place to work?
I couldn't agree more. The oil and gas industry under more scrutiny than ever before right now, so it's a huge responsibility to be able to communicate efficiently and with credibility some of the initiatives the industry is taking to curtail emissions as well. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So I agree with everything David and Angus have said. One angle I can contribute to is also collaboration. So I mentioned there's OSDU for subsurface workloads. There's a similar open group for all things sort of ESG, carbon. It's called Open Footprint. So this is another sort of open group, and their remit is to figure out what is the way to create a standardized sort of data type. What does the carbon data type look like? When we looked at it, there were easily 20, right? So there's some in upstream, midstream, downstream. There are different ways and different data types that are being used. So what they've done is they've actually created a first sort of data model that sort of should integrate and interoperate with the different data types. And that should hopefully over time, and there's still years of work, but that should reduce the heavy lifting as you try to integrate different data types from your operations, whether it's from offshore, onshore, whatever. So,
excellent. Any other questions from the floor? Well, if there's no more questions from the floor, I think we can wrap it there. We've run a little bit over, but we started a bit late, but still plenty of time to get a cup of coffee and join the show at 10 a.m. And I also want to remind you that there's a OGV event on the Wednesday, a reception, I think here on the rooftop. Is that right, Dan? So I think you can sign up for that at eventbrite.com, or you can chat to Dan at the back. So hopefully we'll see you there as well. So that's all from us. I'd like you to thank again our wonderful panel that we have here. Another round of applause for these guys, please.